I know this may come as a shock to many of you, but I'm a Romanian, and my country benefits from some of the most restrictive gun laws in the entire world. And because of that, when I first came to YouTube, I had a very anti-gun mentality. A mentality which has been vehemently challenged both by my subscribers as well as the more recent events which happened in the United States, to the point where I believe that now I am the most pro-gun Romanian that you're ever going to find, even though I am still afraid of firearms. If you were to put a Glock in front of my table right now, it would just have an aura of dread and make me feel uncomfortable. Even if I were to know that it is not particularly loaded, I don't know how I'm ever going to get past that fear. But with that out of the way, I want to express how I managed to transition from being incredibly anti-gun to being incredibly pro-gun. Well, as I mentioned before, real-life events which happened in the United States convinced me, as well as many liberals, on the idea that having a gun is actually good. Do you guys remember the 2020 mostly peaceful riots where the police officers were told to stand back and you had people just going around burning cities and destroying shops and looting from shops, and the cops weren't doing anything? You remember that? Because a lot of liberals remember that. That's the time when a liberal could just go on every single television station in the United States and find over 1,000 reasons on why he had to get a gun. And it went to some very lulzy moments where liberals who never dealt with weapons before now were purchasing them in a record number, to the point where they would frustrate the salesmen. And the reason I'm saying this is because they didn't have the trigger discipline, and it led to things like this.
30 days, no charge.
Ooh, 30 days. Sounds fair. My goodness, Dennis, this feels good. Feels good in my hand.
So after that, you can see that the gun debate in the United States is probably settled for at least a generation. Based on that, because on one hand, you have the right-wingers who look at the Constitution, and the right to carry isn't just to defend yourself, but is to prevent the government from becoming tyrannical, and to keep the government in check because it's very difficult to control an armed population. And on top of that, the right-wingers don't trust the government anyway. And then you have the left-leaning people who don't trust the police officers. So they think that all cops are racist, all cops are bastards, and they have noticed that in the past the cops can be demoralized by the mainstream media, they can be told to stand back by the politicians. And as I mentioned before, during the previous riots in the US, the cops were mostly protecting the rich people and allowing the poor folk to deal with matters their own way. In fact, notice how the cops refused to show up for the local businesses, but the moment the protesters went to CNN headquarters, all of a sudden there was a massive police presence there defending the wealthy and defending the rich. So when you see things like this on television, it doesn't matter what the presenter tries to tell you, you realize that when shit hits the fan, most people trust their neighbor that they know for a lifetime far more than they trust the cop, which takes more than 15 minutes to arrive. Now, an interesting question that a lot of American liberal politicians are asking: why do you need assault rifles? Why do you need semi-full automatic weapons? This is the way they frame it. And my question is, why do the police need them? They don't seem to wonder that question. And I noticed this in Europe. I know it's a different country and different laws apply, but the philosophy seems to be the same, especially in Europe where the population are disarmed. Why do you see police officers at Davos looking like this? Why do you see police officers in Germany looking like this? Why do you see police officers in France looking like this? Why do they need such powerful weapons? Who are they battling? Where is the war? Now, if you're telling me that the situation is that dangerous that it justifies for the police to have that gear, well, shouldn't I have something then? By the time the police arrive, I mean, I'm a law-abiding citizen. I don't want to use anything like that. But if push comes to shove and the police are dressed up to go to battle, maybe I should be able to protect my family. I'm just saying. So this is why, yet again, I would be pro-gun. And I can see the liberals using the same argument. It's like, okay, but I don't trust the police. Like, the police is paid by the cisgender, racist, heteronormative, patriarchal, capitalist society. They're not there for my benefit. The country is systemically racist. Why should the police be armed? I'm afraid of the police, right? Because this is what a lot of politicians and the mainstream media have drilled into the hand of the liberals. Very solid philosophical arguments, which have real-life consequences. And then, of course, in the United States, every now and then there is a tragedy. And, of course, you have certain politicians with the mentality that no good crisis should be left to waste. And the corporate press, which realizes that out of every tragedy, there is some money to be made by fear-mongering to the public and gluing them on the television. But I do have to explain to people why right-wingers never sway their mind when something like this happens, is because the only solution that is ever being proposed, is the only solution, is not even other avenues that are being researched, is that we need legislation to ban guns from people. If there were no guns, then everything would be nice, and there would be flowers, and the birds would be singing, and all that shit. So I gotta ask you, is it legal to get a gun into a school? No? Oh, how do they do it? How do they do it then? How are they bringing it to... It's illegal. Is it legal to shoot someone? No? How do they do it? How did they manage to do it? So you're telling me that in a place where it's illegal to bring a weapon, law-abiding people who follow the law are disarmed, and the people who break the law come inside with a weapon? No! And you want this at the national level. Like, you want more of this, you sick fucks. You want more of this. So how about if you genuinely want to solve the problem, since this proposition is off the table, how about you try to research other avenues for a change? Have you even thought about different possibilities? Look, I'm not smart, okay? I'm just a Romanian with a little table here, talking to a couple of people. But I'm sure you guys have all the enlightened minds of society. You have Dr. Fauci on your side. You have the science on your side. Surely you can figure out an alternative where you don't have to ban the access of guns, but at the same time, limit the number of crazy people. Can we do that? Can we? Is it possible? Have you even explored it? Have you even tried? Have you even considered? I'm just asking, because maybe they have. I mean, all I'm saying is that there are other places in the world where people have guns, like Switzerland, and you don't have these shootings happening. There are other states in the US that have a lower, next to zero number of these things happening. What are they doing that the other states aren't? Like, how do they manage? Are they different people there? Do they have like a different way of experiencing reality than the rest of the world? Surely there must be solutions. But then, that's why a lot of people are concerned, is that they're not looking for solutions. I mean, notice how the mainstream media never talks about gang violence. Or if it does so very rarely. When the overwhelming number of cases happen to be gang violence related. Any reasonable person asks, why are they never talking when there's a drive-by happening? Is it due to the fact that the Bloods and the Crips happen to be black? Is it due to the fact that the Northanials and the Serennials don't happen to be white? Why do they not care? Why does the mainstream media never cover the gang violence, which is taking place in the United States? Fascinating, that isn't it? It's almost like they get to pick and choose the tragedies that they want. It's almost like, okay, well, gang violence doesn't have any political capital for us. It would cause ratings, but it kind of influences with the narrative that we're trying to push and the politicians that we're trying to support. So we're going to ignore those, and we're going to pick on the other ones that do push our narrative. And because of that, people look at it and say, well, maybe you guys are a little bit disingenuous. Not a lot, but just a little bit. Just a tiny bit disingenuous, and maybe you're not actually interested in the well-being of the average citizen. Maybe you just want to do other things. What other things? I don't know. It does seem a little bit sus. It does seem a little bit sus that all the people advocating for taking away the guns from private citizens happen to have security details that you and I wouldn't be able to afford. The people that don't care about riots and all that happen to live in mansions and manors and compounds with big-foot walls surrounding them, which you and I don't happen to afford. I don't really like this level of inequality. I don't really like this thing which is not very equitable. So as such, maybe we can level the playing field. We can't afford security details, but most people can afford to have a gun. And finally, the last argument is that, well, the violence is done because of the weapons. You see, I have changed my mind on this issue ever since I looked at the London stabbing epidemic, in which there aren't any guns. I mean, maybe there are a couple, but it's not statistically significant. And yet, people still stab each other. So in other words, you take away the gun, the people use knives. I'm pretty sure if you took away the knives, which, again, the UK government has tried to accomplish, even arresting people for carrying potato peelers. Yes, that happens. That is reality. Another politician suggesting that knives should have GPS trackers in it. Yes, that did happen. That is reality. The main problem is not with the knives or the tools. The main problem is with the fact that people want to kill other people. That is the root of the issue. And unless you want to tackle the root of the issue, like why is this happening? How can we address it? Unless you actually want to have that conversation, I genuinely don't think you're actually interested in keeping people safe. As a matter of fact, in New Zealand, the Prime Minister went on and said, ever since a tragedy happened in New Zealand, we took away all the guns. Yeah, and you had also the worst COVID lockdowns and the biggest abuse of power that I have ever seen around the world except for Australia and China. There was like one case of COVID and the entire New Zealand went on lockdown. I'm just saying, I'm starting to witness a little bit of correlation and causation. Like when people are armed, the governments are a little bit less tyrannical. It just so happens, it's probably why you never had fascism or communism in the United States. Kind of difficult to take people's land away. Kind of difficult to go on a person's property and take his shit away from him illegally. Or, well, legally, because like if you manage to get into the position of power and then you make the law and you pass a legislation which takes away the people's property like they did in Soviet Russia, well, it's a little bit more difficult to enact that. Same thing happened in Romania. We used to have a Second Amendment, but it was taken away from us by the communists. And after it was taken away from us by the communists, they also took the grain, the land, and other resources and started escorting people to the gulags. But they couldn't do that if people had guns. So it is what it is. It's just an observation, right? Like the guns do keep the government in check a little bit. Okay, not a lot, a little bit. And with that said, let's talk a little bit about the tragedy that happened in the US. I do think that some legislation should be passed that people shouldn't be allowed to talk at least 2 months after a tragedy has happened. Because it's poor taste. Everyone that talks about the tragedy after it has happened within the next 2 months should be treated like a racist. Absolutely the same. It's very poor taste, very disgusting. And I do see the media, the progressive press, releasing articles minutes after it has happened. Like literally seconds after it has happened. Almost as if they just have like the article as a form where they only have to complete and fill out the dots with the name of the people involved and the place. And other than that, they press enter and the article is good to go. The editor already gives the go-ahead. Why? Why is this happening? It's so disgusting, isn't it? Just allow some time to think, some time to meditate, to understand what you're saying. Because some people are saying some dumb shit on Twitter, especially blue check marks. Just calm down, think it through, and then maybe you can write an article. But again, the gun debate is settled. It's statistically speaking, there's absolutely no chance that they're going to make any changes within the United States. Especially not after 2020. The only people that talk about it are the people in the press, a couple of politicians, and some edgy teenagers on Twitter. But that's pretty much it. Let me know what you guys think, though, and I'll see you in the comment section. Take care.